Hi, I'm Lucy Harley-McKeown. I'm one of the co-founders and editors at Project Glitch. That panel really set us up nicely to talk about the EU wallet and age verification. So, you might be able to tell that I'm from the UK, and the UK has been slated a lot today for its age verification laws. So recently there's been the implementation of the Online Safety Bill, which stops you going on like 18 plus videos on Spotify, certain subreddits, like a bunch of different things, pornography websites, unless you verify your age. So that could be taking a selfie or uploading a picture of your ID, which I don't know. It seems like a privacy nightmare to me, and yeah, I'm living through it. So I'm super excited to kind of have these people on stage to talk about how I guess things could be better. Tech is being made, and like there are already ready-made applications that make this stuff better that like are almost being ignored at the moment. If you guys could just introduce yourselves. Ying Tong.
Thanks, Lucy. My name is Ying Tong. I'm an independent applied cryptographer. I've been working with the Ethereum Foundation on a zero-knowledge identity solution. It's very similar to Google's one. And in the past, I also worked with Zcash on financial privacy.
Hello, I'm Aisling. I'm here with Tatseo. We are building a secure multi-party computation network to do lots of stuff with ZK, add private computation on top. We work a lot we do a lot with digital identity, a lot with payments, and all the services that you talked today about needing compliance, etc.
Thanks, Lucy. I'm Amal. I'm here with Aztec. We are an open source ZK rollup on Ethereum that is enabling DeFi applications to benefit from the privacy, programmable privacy, as well as faster and cheaper transactions.
And then I think it would help if we talked a bit more about the EU wallet. When I started reporting on the EU wallet, cryptographers were horrified. Ying Tong, I wondered if you could just run through a few of the criticisms of like what the initial like spec was and like what's being like proposed to be rolled out.
Cryptographers were horrified. This was late last year when the EU Commission asked cryptographers for feedback on their proposed digital ID credential. So they had proposed a design based on a primitive called salted hashes. It's not important to understand the specifics, but the headliner is that this credential is fully linkable, meaning that if you present this credential more than once, then these presentations can be linked to the same person. So the issuer would be able to tell where you're presenting it. The verifier would be able to tell that it's a repeated presentation by the same person. And so deployed at scale, it's a vector for mass surveillance. And I think, in fact, this is what will be deployed in 2026. By the way, this is also the mobile driver's license, which has been deployed in a couple of US states, is also basically the same design, salted hashes.
That's great. And then I wondered, it's not great. I wondered, just thinking back to the last panel, I know it's quite similar to what Google's doing. Why does the EF want to think about this? And I guess I'm wondering if there's a role that decentralization plays in this.
So, the Ethereum Foundation is interested in on the registry layer. So like these public canonical registries of issuers, verifiers, revocation lists, any public information such as decentralized IDs that would provide the infrastructure for this digital ID system to run on. So having this hosted on a credibly neutral layer would basically make these systems more robust.
Nice. And so it sounds like the first use case for the EU wallet will be digital ID. Amal, I just wanted to ask, why the current age verification laws are problematic, and if there are any jurisdictions getting it right.
That's a really good question. In my views, I think what really makes current age verification laws flawed is that they're not really thinking about verifying someone's age, but they're rather thinking about how to prove someone's identity. And I think this kind of thinking really originates from the fact that they're only relying on legacy methods to verify age, which we know that those methods, I'm thinking, for instance, of self-declaration or having parental consent or even biometrics or uploading an ID, for instance, to prove who you are. All of those methods we know are very inefficient and they're flawed ultimately because what they're built on is just data hoarding. And when you do that, you are increasing a lot of data risks because you're creating all these honeypots for companies, and the compliance cost is really high. And we just know that it doesn't work. The current system doesn't work, but it's still the system that regulators are kind of thinking, using that lens to kind of conceive those laws. And I think that's really kind of that tension that we're seeing as to why it's just not working. And we really need to kind of think in a more innovative manner as to how we want to prove someone's age. I mean, I may be biased, but I do think that ZK here is really the solution to kind of bridge that gap.
I think there might be also another solution in the form of MPC. Ash, I wondered if you could just tell us a bit about how that works, and the work that you're doing on it.
Sure. I think maybe just following yours, I think everybody in the room has been talking about ZK and agrees that ZK can get us a lot of the way. I can prove that I'm over 18. I can prove this. I can prove that I'm Irish. I can prove whatever. But there's also another part of the room where there are some regulators who say but there's compliance and I have this kind of fuzzy language about what I might want to prove. And what about if, okay, sure, I prove I'm over 18 now, or I prove that my transaction was not on sanctions, my coins were not sanctioned, whatever. And if I do something bad later and they want to go and track my history, then if I use ZK alone, there's not much that can be done. With MPC, if you have this sort of private computation, there's a bit more that can be done later. And there's a question, there were several questions throughout the day. How should we manage this? Who should have access? Who should, be given access to maybe decrypt if given the correct authority, given warrants, whatever. There are a lot of questions around this, but it's just to say that there are techniques that enable this type of thing now. And I think one thing that's interesting that comes up a lot with this question is, we talk a lot about data minimization. This is something that is completely widespread and accepted in Europe, and you hear it in this room as well. But one thing that starts to arise, a sort of new thing that arises with this, when you go beyond this all or nothing with privacy, some people can see, some people can't, some people can see later, some people can, you can compute, you can change things, you can decrypt, is that this can start to be abused a lot very quickly. And so with kind of data minimization as one principle, you kind of start to see there should be some sort of principle around how this technology is used. So so not just what you collect, but what you do with the data once you collect it. So having some sort of limitations on usage is also super critical in this new realm of privacy tech.
Yeah, and I'm just curious if you could just, like, if it's possible to give a kind of simple explanation of how MPC works, because I think, we've heard a lot about ZK proofs, so...
Yeah, so, I mean, with ZK, you heard, there's a prover, a verifier. Prover makes a proof, a verifier verifies. In MPC, I mean, at a very super high level, I have some private data. I have my passport data or whatever, like my transaction or whatever I'm trying to hide, my private data. There's a technique called secret sharing where I can take this private data, I split it into smaller parts. I take those small parts and I encrypt them. And I send each of the small parts to a different, what we call node operator, somebody running a node in this network that then does computation. Each node receives their encrypted share, and on their own small piece of information from which they can't tell anything, they do some computation. All the nodes do this, and at the end, they kind of bring all the shares back together, and you get the result of the computation. So it's just, computing on encrypted data in a decentralized way. We also do it with ZK so that you can verify at the end that the computation was done correctly. So we're kind of at the point now where a lot of these technologies that we're talking about are being combined, and this is essentially how it works.
Nice. And then I know that your company works with WorldCoin or World, and I wondered if you could just talk a bit about how that works with it, like in terms of identity and like kind of proving identity.
We worked a lot with them on a particular MPC solution. This is less around the ID side and more around the iris, the private data protection. So what they do is basically they have this orb that scans your iris. It was storing the iris in a database, and every new person that joins into the system, they would check if this person has been seen before. There were some legal issues with this where they got some complaints from various governments saying, you shouldn't put people's biometrics in a centralized database. And so they looked for privacy-preserving techniques to then encrypt this data, but still somehow be able to do the uniqueness checks amongst new people joining the system. They found that MPC was kind of the one tool that would give them this privacy guarantee and be kind of scalable and practical enough for, this is a real world deployment, and now they have 15 million people in this system where every time a new person joins, you have to in real time check against the 15 million people in the system, is this a new person? So it's quite a big scale thing. And this is one thing. And they use this then, they scan the iris, it's secret shared to the network, private computation on the shares. Then they use this to derive a world ID that is used then within the world ecosystem. So it's a little bit different to a lot of the other kind of ID systems like the ZK ones where you're proving usually from a passport or some sort of other government issued identity. This is a different ecosystem, not a government based thing, and it's using biometrics.
And just picking up from that, I wondered, Amal, if you could talk a bit about some of the projects that are, in the world today that work, that could be potential solutions.
Yeah, of course. I think the main projects that come to mind are ZK Passport, for instance, which is built with Noir on Aztec. And what they're doing is they're able to generate a proof of your identity, of who you are, without really revealing any of the underlying information. And for that, they're using the MPC chips that are in the passport that they're able to scan and encrypt. And through that, they can generate a proof on an application that could be on your phone, and you can scan that for various use cases. That could be, for instance, to run KYC checks if that was needed, or just generally prove who you are. Or in the context of age verification, you can also prove that use that generated proof to be able to access a website, for instance, saying that you're above the age of 18. There are also a lot of other fantastic projects like Human ID, as well as Rarimo. They're kind of leveraging similar technology for similar purposes. And we're kind of seeing all over the landscape that this is now very much it's no longer a theory. We have the use cases, they're there, they're ready to be used. It's actually interesting because we're also seeing kind of the private sector and like the big tech side also get a little more interested in these technologies. We've seen this year Google, for instance, roll ZK for their wallets, which was huge news, but we're still kind of lacking more interest on the public side of things. The only maybe example that comes to mind that I think really aligns with the privacy ethos, maybe the initiative that we've seen in Buenos Aires, where the city rolled out a ZK-powered wallet, which is now used by almost 3.6 million people in Buenos Aires are able to use it to access services that are provided by the city, whether it's healthcare or issuing driver's licenses. And I think that's really exciting, and we should be, at least the public sector should be looking more into things that are done like in Argentina.
Nice, and I kind of want to stay true to the title of the talk and sort of talk a bit about what we want to see in the future and like future solutions. So yeah, like what kind of standards and principles would you all like to see going forward for digital identity? Ying Tong?
Yeah, I think my comment is really more on process. So we want to avoid what happened with the EUDI cryptographers' feedback, namely delaying the involvement of technical experts to a point where it's just too late. Hopefully it's not too late, but to avoid this huge waste of resources and instead to bring in best practices and technical input from the very start. So I think the best we could do now with the EUDI rollout is to limit it to a subset of use cases for which privacy is not important and for which the whole identity would have to be presented anyway. I think, yeah, involving technologists and also involving best practices such as threat modeling could help us avoid a lot of these mistakes. So the EU Commission themselves had set forth really strict requirements around unlinkability, stating that issuers and verifiers should not be able to link individual presentations of a credential. Yet this did not prevent them from picking a solution that failed to comply with their own requirements. So if they had done a careful threat modeling, and if they had done a careful examination and taxonomy of use cases, and if they had involved technical experts earlier on, this could have been avoided. So I think my comment is a more meta one around process, and I hope that the solution we built will be sound and will be built on best practices.
Ash?
I think like there are a lot of principles that we've heard in the room today. Like, I mean, starting at this morning, there were kind of comments about how we should be thinking a bit more seriously and like, you know, thinking things through fully and going like the last mile. I think this is super important. And I think one thing that, especially as technologists, I don't know, I don't like to say this because there's a lot of us in the room and I don't want to like call us all out because I think we're all a bit guilty of it. I think we don't take enough responsibility for the systems that we build. And I think like I would really like to like for the technologists to feel as if you personally are responsible if something goes wrong in this system. How would you design a system if like you are going to be held accountable for this? And like I think it's quite predictable that things will go wrong with these because they are experimental, they are kind of new technologies. So I think it's super important to sit down and actually really think hard about how we want to build these systems. And then I think there are lots of guidelines like this Tearing Down the Walled Garden paper that was released recently and discussed earlier today. There's a whole list of principles in there that I think nobody will argue with. They're all completely rational. Sounds great. If this is practical, let's go. But yeah, ultimately where you reduce control of authority, basically if you can try to decentralize, avoid surveillance, avoid harming humans. Another word I heard in the room a lot today, which is so great, is around dignity. And it's cool that I start to hear people saying this in response to technology. It's wow, okay, great. I don't know if it's just that there are policy people here or if technologists don't talk about this, but it's super nice. So I think building for these things is great. So decentralization, privacy, dignity, try to keep people human.
Amal, let's go.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think as well, knowing that anything that relates to digital ID will be processing extremely sensitive data, I have to put my privacy attorney hat here for a second. That rings a lot of alarm bells. And so we need to make sure that privacy is not an afterthought, and we cannot have any compromise when it comes to building a digital ID. And we need privacy by default and by design. And I think that also kind of ties back to Ying Tong's point, which was that we need the technologists to be onboarded in the design really early on to make sure that that's the case. And more specifically, we need to have more transparency as to how the data is going to be stored, how the data is going to be processed, but also ultimately how the data is going to be secured on these systems. And I think without that, then we're just creating a completely dystopian system that I personally wouldn't be able to endorse in any way.
Great. I've come to the end of my questions. Is there anything that you guys want to say as closing remarks? I feel like those were quite good closing remarks, but if anyone has anything else to say, speak now.
I kind of want to hear more about the Buenos Aires wallet because that's news to me. Is it a digital ID wallet?
Yes. So what they rolled out is kind of similar to what the EU is working on, but it's fully powered by ZK, and it's been live since earlier this year, I believe. Don't quote me on it. And basically pretty much similar services are offered through this wallet as what the EU is looking at offering, which would be access to health services, any kind of service that the city offers to the people of Buenos Aires, and all of that powered through zero knowledge proof and just making sure that there are no audit trails that are embedded in what people do or how they request services through the app. I know that was a key point there when they were developing it. But then to kind of build up on Lucy's question as well, I think in terms of closing remarks, from my point and also working for a privacy-preserving technology protocol, I think what's really key and what we really need is safe harbors as well for technologists to build this tool and experiment safely. And for that, we need more regulatory clarity as well. So that would be my personal call to action as a closing remark.
Ash?
Sounds great.
Should we take some questions from the audience, if anyone has any?
Right here. I got you.
I have a question for Ash. You were talking about adding human dignity back and just how, developers are responsible. I love that. And I notice a lot of developers will find themselves in compromising positions where a government agent or a company might say, can you build this tool? And the developer knows that if they don't build it, someone else is going to build it. So in that kind of a situation, how would you recommend a developer or a team should behave? Is it a matter of principle and we we all just walk away from these deals, or do you work in the project and just find all of the ways to mitigate any sort of damage to reduce the risk as much as possible?
This is literally the worst question you could ask. Like, there's no good answer to this. Like, of course, you can stick to your principles, like fight, whatever. But if you talk to like 90% of cypherpunks, they're working on government projects. They're getting paid by whatever, like either companies or government funding, whatever. Like not very, and like on the not very cypherpunk projects. And so like, and it's true, there is this like dilemma that like if I like at least I have some moral something somewhere that maybe like if I build it, okay, it's not that bad. But yeah, it's an impossible question. And like I think people who do stick to their principles and who do actually build the tools that they really strongly believe in, that maybe have these cypherpunk values or whatever. I don't want to say cypherpunk too much because it's maybe too idealistic or whatever, but like that stick to these like core principles that like everybody agrees are good at whatever, they really suffer. Like they suffer a lot, and they get marginalized and they get arrested and they get like whatever. And it's not really a good way to live. And then you have to choose, am I okay like sacrificing some serious part of my life to do this? Some people are okay, and that's great, and like we should work to support them, but like it's a super difficult decision that like really the mass majority of people will not make. So yeah, my advice is like try to make those people comfortable and happy and like make them not suffer that much. But yeah, it's an impossible question. But
I think one good way to reframe it is purpose limitation, which is related to data minimization. Like basically build an app that is so narrow and so useless at doing anything besides what is intended. So for example, like the Swiss COVID app, it literally just involved like phones sending out like random strings periodically. And then if any one of these people tested positive for COVID, they would voluntarily publish the log of random strings. And then everyone who found a match in one of the strings was in their vicinity would then know that they had been exposed. So unlike in many other countries, this contact tracing apps is really super useless, does not collect anything about your identity, about your location even. And yeah, this kind of like a mind hack as a developer. You can think of like how to make my app as useless as possible, as like limited as possible in its purpose, in the data that it collects. Another good example was like, there was this paper called Not Yet Another Digital ID System. Yeah, and it was a bunch of researchers working with the Red Cross to implement human aid distribution. So they were working in these conflict zones where basically they would have to handle very sensitive information and potentially like adversarial regimes like the Taliban. Like you don't want this information to fall into their hands. So the question was, how could they design a system to distribute humanitarian aid without collecting identifying information, but at the same time allow them to enforce that that each participant is authorized to collect this aid. So yeah, it's not a direct answer to Naomi's question, but I think it's a useful reframing of our role as developers. Yeah.
I don't see any more hands unless, oh, there's one there.
I got you. I'll get there. It's my speed noise.
Don't hurt yourself. Thank you. So I'm wondering how important you think it might be to actually have a really competitive, robust wallet marketplace. It seems like the last few presentations we've heard about how important a wallet will be. It's obviously going to make things faster. It'll allow people to transact faster, move about the world, move around the country, transportation faster, interact more safely online. So it seems like that's the way it's going. The problem in the title of this keynote, this panel, is the dystopian part. If we only have one company that's the wallet provider, they now get all the information. So do you think this is a big solution that we should be marching in this direction to have regulation work with the private sector to create a safe kind of competitive landscape, but also maybe reduce regulation so that you have a really competitive wallet marketplace where they're all using ZK, for example, and it's approved, certified, whatever, SOC 2, Type 2, insert the thing here, but at least there's hundreds of them and they work globally. Does that seem like a kind of a really big solution?
I want to say something to defend Google, which is that their core ZK protocol is called Longfellow ZK, is fully open source. So if you want to implement a wallet and integrate their ZK solution, you can. That being said, they obviously have an in-house product, Google Wallet, and they can integrate it, and it's like just widespread adoption for free. And I think, yeah, it is absolutely essential to have a marketplace of wallets, to have alternatives to Google Wallet so that we don't become locked into one wallet provider. And furthermore, I think it's important to understand how exactly this wallet is managing our data. I think the presentation of credentials could absolutely fully be done offline without talking to Google servers. So it could, like, if implemented right, which I think they will do, we don't have to worry about that. But yeah, I think any wallet that is adopted at scale must be fully open source and auditable. And as you said, there should be a marketplace, there should be alternatives and competition.
I would also add that it should be decentralized, because otherwise we risk to falling back into the conversation around dystopian kind of risks that are associated with it. Because if we have a centralized provider or centralized wallets, I think we're still far away from the solution that we're looking for.
I think this wall garden paper again had like a nice approach to this, with the the John Hancock project would come up with like the list of principles, or they would agree on like what they feel is like a good, like how a wallet, I don't know if they mentioned wallet specifically, but like how a good credential would look or how a good wallet would look. And if then like welcoming many different entities to come and say, okay, look, yeah, we reach all these standards that you want, then they can like somehow give it some badge of honor. I don't know. But like, yeah, I think definitely having variety is great, and having like somehow monitoring that these things like reach some sort of like level of security principles, whatever, like decentralization, privacy, whatever, then I think the more the merrier.
I think the walled garden paper mentioned open standards and like the open creation of standards as like one of the most important sort of foundations for like true diversity. So yeah, basically allowing different wallet providers to interoperate and basically to compete on a level playing ground.
Nice. I think we're out of time. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Lucy.
Thank you.